Assalamu alaikum, let's explore this Islamic topic together. Hey, so, you wanted to know about Islamic teachings on animal welfare? It's a fascinating topic, actually, and way more significant than you might initially think. It's not just a side note. It's deeply woven into the fabric of Islamic history and belief. Think about it. Islam emphasizes compassion and kindness as core values. It's not just about being good to people, it's about being good to everything God has created. And that includes animals. This isn't some modern interpretation either. The concern for animal welfare has been a significant part of Islamic jurisprudence from the very beginning. You see, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, constantly stressed the importance of treating animals with respect and kindness. There are countless stories and anecdotes passed down through generations, showing how he interacted with animals, highlighting the ethical considerations involved. He'd often speak about the importance of not harming animals unnecessarily, even insects. There's a famous story about him stopping a companion from harming an anthill, emphasizing the interconnectedness of life and the significance of every creature, no matter how small. This wasn't just a personal quirk. It was a reflection of the core Islamic principles. The Quran repeatedly mentions the interconnectedness of all creation, highlighting the responsibility of humans as stewards of the earth and its inhabitants. This concept of stewardship, Khalifa, is central to understanding Islamic perspectives on animal welfare. We aren't just here to exploit the planet. We're responsible for taking care of it. And that includes animals. Historically, Islamic scholars have deeply explored the implications of this responsibility. Islamic jurisprudence, or *fiqh*, has developed detailed guidelines on various aspects of animal welfare, encompassing everything from how animals should be treated during slaughter to the ethical considerations of animal experimentation. The rules and guidelines aren't arbitrary. They're rooted in the Quran and the Sunnah, the teachings and practices of the Prophet Muhammad. For example, the way animals are slaughtered is crucial. Islamic law emphasizes a quick, painless to minimize suffering. It's not just about the meat. It's about the dignity and respect shown to the animal even in its final moments. This isn't just about religious ritual. It's a reflection of the broader ethical principle of minimizing suffering, which is applicable to all living beings. Furthermore, Islamic teachings strongly discourage animal cruelty in any form. Whether it's unnecessary riding, overworking, starvation, or simply inflicting pain for no reason. These actions are considered morally wrong and are often discouraged by Islamic scholars through various rulings and interpretations over the centuries. Think about it. If we, as humans, strive to avoid unnecessary suffering ourselves, wouldn't it be hypocritical to inflict it on others, even animals? The historical con is also important here. In many societies throughout history, animals were often treated as mere tools or commodities. However, Islamic teachings offered a different perspective, providing a framework for ethical treatment, compassion, and respect. Even if the practical application varied across different cultures and times. Now, I know some people might think that on animal welfare is somehow a distraction from other important issues, like social justice or poverty. But it's not an either-or situation. In fact, a holistic Islamic worldview emphasizes the interconnectedness of all things. Caring for animals is seen as part of a broader commitment to justice and compassion. A testament to our stewardship of the earth in recognition of the inherent dignity of all of creation. The beauty of Islamic jurisprudence on animal welfare is that it's not static. It's a living tradition that adapts to changing times and cons. Contemporary Islamic scholars continue to engage with these issues, examining the implications of modern practices like factory farming and animal experimentation. Within an Islamic ethical framework, they're constantly striving to find ways to reconcile the needs of human society with the ethical treatment of animals. So, in a nutshell, Islamic jurisprudence on animal welfare is significant because it's a fundamental part of Islamic faith. It's a testament to the deep-seated values of compassion, justice, and respect for all of God's creation, reflected in both historical teachings and contemporary interpretations. It's not simply about following rules. It's about cultivating a heart that is sensitive to the suffering of others, whether human or animal. It's about recognizing our shared existence on this planet and our collective responsibility to ensure a just and compassionate world for everyone and everything. Hey, so you wanted to know about animal welfare in early Islam? Huh? It's actually a really fascinating topic, and way more nuanced than you might think. It's not just about a few scattered verses in the Quran. It's woven into the very fabric of how Islamic law developed. Imagine the Arabian Peninsula back then, harsh desert, nomadic life. Animals were essential for survival. Camels, sheep, goats, they were everything: food, transport, wealth. So, you wouldn't expect a religion that thrived there to just ignore animal welfare, right? In fact, it was pretty much the opposite. The Quran itself sets the stage. It's filled with verses about the interconnectedness of all creation. God's mercy and compassion extend to everything, not just humans. There are verses that specifically talk about kindness to animals, the whole no cruelty thing. It wasn't some abstract philosophical idea. It was deeply practical and integral to daily life. Think of it like this. If you're relying on an animal for your livelihood, treating it badly is essentially shooting yourself in the foot. A malnourished, overworked camel isn't going to carry you across the desert. But the Quran isn't a legal book. It lays the groundwork, the ethical foundation. The real nuts and bolts of animal welfare law started coming in through the Sunnah, which are the Prophet Muhammad's sayings and actions. These weren't written down immediately. They were passed down orally, meticulously preserved and interpreted by the early Islamic scholars. These scholars, the *fuqaha*, were incredibly influential. They didn't just interpret the Quran and Sunnah. They wrestled with practical dilemmas. They lived in a world where animals were crucial, but they also understood the importance of humane treatment. Many hadiths, accounts of the Prophet's actions, show him explicitly advocating for kindness to animals. There are stories of him forbidding the unnecessary killing of animals, even ants. He'd instruct his companions to be gentle with their mounts, to provide them with adequate food and rest. These weren't just symbolic gestures. They were examples of how to live a life in accordance with God's will, reflecting a deeply ingrained respect for all living beings. So, what kind of laws emerged from this? Well, it wasn't a codified legal system like we have today, but rather a growing body of principles and guidelines. These principles influenced everything from how animals were slaughtered, emphasizing swiftness and minimizing suffering, to the importance of providing them with adequate food and water. Think of the concept of halal, permissible in Islam. This extended to how animals were treated before slaughter. A stressed, mistreated animal wasn't considered acceptable. The early jurists started looking at things like, what constitutes acceptable working conditions for animals? How should we handle injured or sick animals? These were questions that had no easy answers. They debated and argued, considering various perspectives and weighing the ethical implications alongside the practical realities of their time. One fascinating aspect was the emphasis on avoiding unnecessary cruelty. This wasn't about creating a completely separate, utopian world for animals. It was about integrating humane treatment into everyday life. It was about recognizing the inherent value and dignity of all creatures, even if their primary purpose was to serve human needs. From the very beginning, was on prevention. Preventing suffering was more important than simply reacting to it. So, you'd see rulings against unnecessary branding or mutilation of animals, actions that caused pain without any practical benefit. Over time, these early principles formed the basis for a more structured approach to animal welfare in Islamic jurisprudence. Different schools of Islamic thought developed slightly different interpretations, but the core principle of compassion and kindness consistently remained at the heart of the matter. It wasn't a static system. It evolved alongside society, adapting to new challenges and technological advancements. So, to summarize, the early moments of Islamic jurisprudence on animal welfare weren't about creating some grand, detailed legal document. It was a gradual, organic, rooted in the core values of Islam: compassion, justice, and the recognition of God's mercy extending to all of creation. It was a practical and ethical approach to living alongside animals, ensuring their well-being was considered, not as an afterthought, but as an integral part of a just and compassionate society. It was a beautiful blend of religious conviction and practical wisdom, setting a precedent that still resonates today. Hey, so, we were talking about how animals are treated in Islam, right? We touched on the basics, like the Quranic verses about kindness and the prophets, peace be upon him, example. But things get really interesting when we dive into the middle chapters, the detailed legal opinions and interpretations that developed over centuries. Think of it like this: the Quran and Sunnah, the Prophet's teachings and practices, are the foundation, the bedrock. But then, scholars built a whole legal structure on top of that, addressing all sorts of complex situations. It's not as simple as, be nice to animals. Islamic jurisprudence, or *FIQH*, gets into the specifics. For example, how do you deal with animal sacrifice? It's a crucial part of many Islamic rituals, particularly during Eid al-Adha. But the rules surrounding it are incredibly precise, everything from the type of animal allowed, healthy, mature, free from defects, to the method of slaughter, minimizing pain and suffering. There's a whole scholarly tradition dedicated to ensuring the animal's death is as swift and painless as possible. They weren't just concerned with doing it, they were meticulously examining how to do it, ethically and religiously. Then there's the issue of ownership and animal rights. Islam recognizes that animals are not just res to be exploited. They have rights too, although those rights are interpreted within the human-centered framework of the faith. You have a responsibility as an owner to provide for your animals food, water, shelter, veterinary care. Neglect is strictly forbidden and considered a sin. This isn't just some abstract principle. Throughout Islamic history, there were, and still are, legal avenues to address animal cruelty. If someone was found to be consistently mistreating their animals, there could be consequences, ranging from fines to community pressure. Now, this gets really fascinating when you consider the historical con. Think about the societies where Islamic jurisprudence developed. These were largely agrarian societies, where animals played a vital role in daily life. Camels, Horses, donkeys, sheep, goats, they were crucial for transportation, agriculture, and even warfare. So, the legal discussions weren't detached from reality. They directly impacted people's lives and livelihoods. The scholars weren't just sitting in ivory towers. They were grappling with practical problems related to animal husbandry, trade, and conflict. For example, imagine the debates around working animals. How many hours can you make a donkey work? What kind of rest does it need? What are the consequences if you overwork it? These aren't abstract questions. They're questions that needed answers for a society heavily reliant on animal labor. And you see the development of legal opinions over time, reflecting changing circumstances and societal understanding. Early interpretations might have been less nuanced, simply stating the obligation to be kind. But later scholars developed a much more detailed system addressing specific situations and controversies. And it's not just about livestock. Islamic jurisprudence also addresses the treatment of wild animals. Hunting, for instance, is generally allowed, but there are strict rules. You can't hunt endangered species, and you're expected to avoid unnecessary killing. There's a strong emphasis on only taking what you need, and respecting the balance of nature. This perspective, I think, is really interesting considering the historical and environmental context. It's a recognition that humans are part of a larger ecosystem, not its masters. Furthermore, the legal discussions often included considerations of the animal's sentience. While it wasn't framed in the same way we might discuss animal rights today, the principles of compassion and minimizing suffering permeate these. The idea of causing unnecessary pain or distress to an animal was seen as morally reprehensible. This isn't just some kind of anthropomorphism, it's a recognition that animals experience pain and fear, and that we have a moral duty to treat them accordingly. This recognition of animal feelings is woven throughout the interpretations of Islamic law related to animals. So, when we talk about Islamic jurisprudence on animal welfare, we're not just talking about a collection of abstract rules. We're talking about a living tradition, a continuous dialogue between religious scholarly interpretation, and the practical realities of human interaction with animals. It's a complex, nuanced system that has evolved over centuries, reflecting the changing circumstances and deepening understanding of both religious principles and animal welfare. It's a conversation that continues to this day, prompting ongoing discussions about how to apply these principles in a modern world. It's a lot richer and more engaging than I think most people initially realize. Okay, so we've been talking about how animals are treated in Islam, right? It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? We've covered how it's not just some modern thing, but deeply rooted in Islamic history and tradition. And as we near the end of our little chat about this, you might be wondering, what's the overall conclusion? What's the big takeaway about Islamic jurisprudence on animal welfare? Well, it's not like there's one single, neat statement that sums it all up. It's more of a tapes woven from different threads, if you get what I mean. But the core message, the overarching principle, is incredibly clear. Compassion and kindness towards animals are not optional extras in Islam. They're fundamental. They are a direct reflection of one's faith and relationship with God. Think about it this way. Islam emphasizes the interconnectedness of all creation. God is the creator of everything, and humans are seen as stewards, responsible for the well-being of the entire world, including animals. This isn't just some vague, philosophical idea. It's directly reflected in the Quran and the Sunnah, the Prophet Muhammad's teachings and practices. We saw how the Quran repeatedly stresses the importance of protecting animals, often using very strong language. For instance, it condemns unnecessary cruelty, talks about the rights of animals to food and water, and even emphasizes the importance of being gentle with them. There are stories in the Quran about animals talking and demonstrating intelligence, further highlighting their importance and the need for respectful treatment. Then you have the Prophet Muhammad's example, the Sunnah. He wasn't just preaching, he was living the principles of animal welfare. There are numerous stories illustrating his deep compassion for animals. He forbade the unnecessary harming of animals and encouraged their gentle treatment. Stories are told about him showing kindness to birds, animals in distress, and even providing animals with water in the desert. His actions weren't symbolic, they were practical. He demonstrated respect for their lives and dignity. Remember that story we talked about the Prophet's actions regarding a pregnant cat? It perfectly illustrates the point. He wouldn't even disturb her or her nest. It's the perfect example of respecting their natural life and avoiding unnecessary disturbance. These stories are not just cute anecdotes. They're fundamental examples of how Muslims should interact with the animal kingdom. The jurists, the scholars who studied Islamic law, built upon these foundational s. They developed detailed legal rulings, fatwas, addressing various aspects of animal welfare. This wasn't some abstract intellectual exercise. These rulings dealt with real-world issues, everything from the proper methods of slaughtering animals for meat, ensuring they're not subjected to unnecessary suffering, to forbidding animal fights, and prohibiting the use of animals for frivolous purposes. One really interesting point is that Islamic jurisprudence takes into account the con. What's acceptable in one situation might be prohibited in another. For instance, the permissibility of hunting is contingent on the need for food or self-defense. And even then, it's expected to be done humanely. It's not a blanket approval but a decision, the necessity and the method used. So, to conclude, Islamic jurisprudence on animal welfare isn't a set of rigid, inflexible rules. It's a dynamic, evolving system core principles of compassion, justice, and responsibility. It's a holistic approach emphasizing the interconnectedness of all living beings and the importance of human stewardship of creation. The conclusion isn't simply a list of do's and don'ts, but a call to ethical and compassionate action towards animals. Religious and the Prophet's example. The emphasis is always on minimizing suffering, respecting the dignity of animals, and ensuring their needs are met wherever possible. This isn't about creating a separate legal for animals, but integrating a deep awareness of animal welfare into the broader core of Muslim life and practice. It's about understanding that kindness to animals isn't just a good deed. It's a reflection of a strong, compassionate faith. And that's a powerful conclusion, isn't it? It speaks volumes about the depth and breadth of Islamic teachings. We've just scratched the surface, really. There's so much more to explore within this fascinating topic. So, what does Islamic jurisprudence on animal welfare teach Muslims today? It's a fascinating topic, and honestly, way more nuanced than most people realize. It's not just a simple, be nice to animals, thing, although that's definitely part of it. It's woven deeply into the very fabric of Islamic history and teaching. Think about it, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself was known for his incredible compassion towards animals. Stories about him are legendary. There's the one about the cat sleeping on his sleeve while he was praying, rather than disturb it. He shortened his prayer and carefully his sleeve. Another tells of him ordering a well to be dug for a thirsty dog. These aren't just cute anecdotes. They're fundamental examples illustrating the profound respect Islam places on all of creation. C. Islamic jurisprudence, or *fiqh*, isn't a static set of rules. It's a living body of legal and ethical principles that tries to apply the core teachings of Islam to real-life situations. When it comes to animal welfare, that means considering everything from how we treat animals we own, to how we interact with animals in the wild, to how we treat animals used for food. And it's always about finding a balance between human needs and the welfare of animals. Historically, Islamic scholars have meticulously examined the Quran and the Sunnah, the Prophet's teachings and practices, to derive principles of animal welfare. The Quran itself contains many verses emphasizing the interconnectedness of all life and the importance of being responsible stewards of the earth. We are not just placed here to dominate, but to care for and protect what Allah has created. This idea of being a caliph or a responsible trustee is central to the Islamic understanding of our relationship with the environment, and animals are a significant part of that environment. So, how does this translate into practical guidance for Muslims today? Well, for starters, it means ensuring animals under our care receive proper food, water, shelter, and veterinary attention. Cruelty is strictly forbidden. This extends beyond simple neglect. It encompasses things like overworking animals, causing them unnecessary pain, or engaging in activities like animal fighting, all of which are explicitly condemned. There are also specific rules concerning the slaughtering of animals for food. Islamic law dictates that animals must be slaughtered humanely, with a swift, clean cut to minimize suffering. The emphasis is always on reducing pain and ensuring the animal's death is as peaceful as possible. This isn't simply about adhering to a religious ritual. It's a fundamental aspect of ethical treatment. It highlights the belief that even when utilizing animals for our sustenance, we need to do so with respect and compassion. Interestingly, Islamic jurisprudence also touches upon the environmental impact of our actions. Overexploitation of natural res and unsustainable practices that harm animals are considered unethical. This links animal welfare directly to broader issues of environmental sustainability, something that is gaining increasing importance in today's world. It's a holistic approach, looking at the interconnectedness of all beings and our responsibility towards them. Now, it's important to acknowledge that interpretations and practices vary across different Islamic schools of thought and across different cultures. There's no single, monolithic view on every aspect of animal welfare. Just like any other area of *fiqh, scholars have debated and continue to debate the specifics. But the overarching principle remains consistent. Humane treatment and respect for all creatures are cornerstones of Islamic ethics. So, what does this mean for a Muslim living today? It means being mindful in all our interactions with animals. It's about making conscious choices to minimize harm and maximize well-being, whether it's choosing ethically meat, advocating for animal rights, or simply showing kindness and compassion to the animals around us. It's about striving to live up to the ideals of responsibility and compassion embodied in Islamic teachings. It's about remembering that we are not separate from the natural world, but an integral part of it. And that responsibility extends to every living creature we share this planet with. It's a continuous journey, a constant striving to be better stewards of the earth and all its inhabitants, and that's a beautiful, challenging, and rewarding endeavor. Goodbye, May Allah bless us all. That's our discussion for today.